Welcome to AINdebrief, where we take a deeper look at important and interesting aviation news stories. I'm AIN News Editor Chad Troutvetter. Since today is Earth Day, I sat down with Kennedy Ricci, president of business aviation sustainability firm 4Air, to see why operators in this industry should be concerned about their carbon footprints. He also outlines how operators can make small changes by using sustainable aviation fuel and carbon credits to reduce or even zero out their aircraft carbon emissions. So, Kennedy, this is a really fairly conservative industry. So, climate change is not actually, widely accepted in this industry. Given that, why should business aircraft operators care about sustainability?
Yeah, I think that's a great question that we hear a lot, but there are a few trends out there that I see that are driving sustainability, that are kind of pushing it and pulling it to some degree, both from outside the industry and inside of it too. So certainly there's more and more customers and customers' families that are caring about the impact of their choices, and kind of that applies to their how they travel as well. There's obviously more public and press attention to the impact of flying, and that's something that's only going to grow with more time, especially as other sectors start to decarbonize. But the big ones, the reasons to really care are starting to be more direct regulatory measures that are coming, things like CORSIA and EU ETS. Those are direct ones that will affect the industry, but even indirect ones, things like new public company disclosure requirements, potentially the same thing for companies doing business in California. There's only going to be a growing amount of regulation, either requiring, minimum disclosure, but oftentimes, going beyond that. Last one, though, that I don't hear a ton of people talk about, but that we do see is actually an employee benefit. So more and more employees are wanting to, align their careers with their personal values. And we're seeing people, leave the industry or even refuse to join it because aviation's, reputation isn't necessarily a sustainable one. So some employers are starting to realize the value of having, a program or a strategy in place to help, retain and attract talent. So I think, employees are starting to care about it. Certainly customers are caring about it. Industry stakeholders and the press cares about it. But, at the end of the day, there's going to be more and more regulation that'll kind of, push us to care about it.
So since this train is coming then from different angles, so an operator, how can they get started?
Yeah, so we always say the best place to start is with the carbon footprint. You have to compile, an inventory of where your emissions are coming from, because each, industry stakeholder will have a different kind of, compilation or composition of their emissions, and understanding the sources of those is going to be the best way to ask the right questions about how to actually reduce them or address them. So, if you're an FBO, your biggest emissions are probably going to come from the electricity, the heating for your facility, the fuel that you use in your fuel trucks or your ground equipment usage. But if you're an operator, that's going to be your fuel usage. It's going to be the jet fuel. So, understanding that for your particular situation, and that'll kind of vary across, different participants, different stakeholders. But understanding that will help you address, and find what those solutions might be for you. So for an FBO, it might be renewable energy. It might be renewable energy credit. It could be electric, equipment or renewable diesel. If you're an operator, to be looking for sustainable aviation fuel or finding opportunities to uplift or participate with that.
Operators also need to think about their ground operations, such as their hangar and what they use to tow aircraft with as well, right?
Yeah. So, facilities and ground operations, it's still, we need to address kind of every part of the industry. So on ground operations, there's certainly an opportunity for, electric, either ground equipment or vehicles. There's still going to be some operational challenges with that, which we understand. So there's the opportunities to use renewable diesel, similar to kind of sustainable aviation fuel and often made in the main process, that you can use that to help decarbonize your ground equipment. Note that biodiesel is not the same as renewable diesel, just as biofuels aren't the same as sustainable aviation fuel. So making sure that, people we work with understand that differentiation. But using renewable energy, in your operations, it's much easier to kind of decarbonize the ground operations of a business today than the flight operations.
And for flight operations, the main, you said sustainable aviation fuel, but also carbon credits. So how do operators find where they can get SAF? And how do they know that the carbon credits they're buying are legitimate?
Yes. So that's an area where we can come in. We actually launched a map of FBOs that have sustainable aviation fuel. We found it kind of difficult because, if you just look at the press releases, it gets confusing whether or not an airport or an FBO has ongoing sustainable, aviation fuel supply, if it was just a one-time, and if it's available for purchase, if it's available for business jet operators. So we wanted to help, clarify, okay, these are locations that are verified to have ongoing supply available for sale. And so we launched kind of, that resource on our website. But companies like SkyVector, AirNav, more and more kind of flight planning tools are starting to list FBOs with sustainable aviation fuel available. A lot of FBOs will have it on their website now. They'll show pricing if they have it available. So those other resources can be used as well. On the carbon side, this again is kind of something we can help with and really dive into the specifics around a project. It's really important to ensure that you're using, the most robust projects. So always buy, verified projects from the most, reputable standards. There's an increasing number of standards out there today, and a lot of the new ones don't necessarily have the expertise or the kind of industry reputation that the big ones like Vera, Gold Standard, CAR, or Climate Action Reserve or American Carbon Registry will have. These are kind of big ones that have been around for 10 years or more and have that expertise. So making sure you're buying from a verified credit, first of all, and one that comes from a reputable verification source, and understand where you're buying the credits from. More and more we're talking to people who don't really understand who they're actually buying the credits from. And that's something we're trying to help them, understand. You might have, is this actually a project developer? Is this a broker? But making sure, once you do buy the verified credits, that they're still coming through a variable kind of chain of custody to you.
And speaking of chain of custody, that also applies to SAF book and claim, right?
Correct. So when we look at kind of the chain of custody from sustainable aviation fuel, we watch it go all the way to an aircraft wing. So we look at it from the front of the 4-Air program. It gets delivered into, a FBO's fuel farm, that gets delivered into an aircraft wing. And then at that point, we can look at, a book and claim transaction. So that way we have a full chain of custody all the way through from production to delivery of the fuel, and making sure that we document that. So you all have, all of that chain of custody in terms of a documentation perspective as well. It's going to be really important, both on a voluntary and regulatory basis.
Right. Before we wrap up, since it's Earth Day, what is the takeaway message that you have for business aircraft operators regarding sustainability?
Yeah, I think, starting a program or getting involved, it doesn't need to be, a big or expensive project today. The important thing today is to start somewhere and to start something. The cost of doing something today, is usually very surprisingly inexpensive to most people. Most conversations we have, people don't realize just how easy or how inexpensive it is. But that cost to start something is really, only going to get more expensive with time. So try to start somewhere, build a carbon footprint, and see what you can do today.
All right. Thanks, Kennedy. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks for listening to AINdebrief. Another podcast episode will air next Friday. In the meantime, go to www.ainonline.com for the latest aviation news from AIN.